The widow, Olivia Mercer, stood on the porch of her failing ranch outside Bodie, California, staring at the notice in her trembling hands while the summer sun beat down mercilessly in July of 1878. The bank was coming for everything she owned in 3 days, unless she could produce $200, an impossible sum that might as well have been 2,000 given her empty coffers and the drought that had killed half her cattle over the past year. She was 24 years old and already felt ancient. Her husband Thomas had died 8 months ago when his horse threw him near the creek bed, breaking his neck instantly. The ranch hands had carried his body home wrapped in canvas, and Olivia had buried him on the hill overlooking the property he had loved so much. Since then, she had tried everything to keep the ranch running, selling off livestock at poor prices, pawning her mother's jewelry, working from dawn until her hands bled. Nothing had been enough. The sound of hoofbeats made her look up from the notice. A lone rider approached on a paint horse, moving at an easy pace that suggested he had nowhere particular to be. As he drew closer, Olivia could make out broad shoulders, a dusty brown hat, and a face darkened by sun and travel. He looked to be in his late 20s, with eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat as he stopped near her porch. "Name's Blake Johnson. I was passing through and noticed your fences need some work. Wondered if you might need a hand in exchange for a meal and a place to sleep tonight." Olivia folded the notice quickly and tucked it into her apron pocket. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Johnson, but I cannot afford to hire anyone right now." "Not asking for pay," Blake said, dismounting with fluid grace. His horse was well kept despite the dust of the trail, and his saddle showed signs of careful maintenance. "Just kindness. I have been riding for near a week straight and would appreciate a home-cooked meal and a roof, even if it is just a barn." There was something honest in his face that made Olivia hesitate. She had been alone on this ranch except for her 10-year-old son Daniel for months now. The fences did need work. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. 100 small repairs she could not manage alone mocked her daily. "I suppose I could spare some supper," she said finally. "The barn is clean enough. You can bed down there." Blake nodded his thanks and led his horse toward the water trough. Olivia watched him for a moment, noting how gently he handled the animal, how he checked its hooves and spoke to it in low tones. Her late husband had always said you could judge a man by how he treated his horse. Daniel came running from behind the house, his face flushed with excitement. "Mama, is that a real cowboy?" "Mind your manners, Daniel," Olivia said, but she could not help smiling at her son's enthusiasm. The boy had missed having a man around, though he tried to be brave about it. Blake walked over, leading his horse. "You must be the man of the house," he said to Daniel, extending his hand seriously. "Blake Johnson." Daniel shook it vigorously, his small hand disappearing in Blake's calloused grip. "Daniel Mercer, are you really a cowboy? Have you been on cattle drives? Did you ever see outlaws?" "Daniel, enough," Olivia said, feeling her cheeks warm. "Mr. Johnson is tired." "It is fine, madam," Blake assured her. "And yes, I have been on drives, worked ranches from Texas to Montana. As for outlaws, I try to avoid trouble where I can find it." Over supper that evening, Olivia found herself relaxing despite her worries. Blake ate with obvious appreciation, complimenting her cooking in ways that seemed genuine rather than flattering. Daniel peppered him with questions, and Blake answered patiently, telling stories of life on the trail that made the boy's eyes grow wide. "What brings you to California?" Olivia asked, ladling more stew into Blake's bowl despite his protests that he had eaten plenty. "Wandering mostly," Blake admitted. "I have been moving since the war ended, never found a place that felt like putting down roots. You fought in the war, Daniel asked eagerly. I did, Blake said, and something shadowed his face for a moment. But that was a long time ago, and not something worth dwelling on. After supper, Blake insisted on helping with the dishes, then went out to examine the fences as the sun began to set. Olivia watched from the kitchen window as he walked the property line, testing posts and rails with practiced eyes. She should not be noticing the way he moved or the strength evident in his frame. She was a widow in mourning, even if 8 months had passed. But loneliness was a powerful thing, and she had been so very lonely. The next morning, Olivia woke to find Blake had already fixed the barn door and was working on the fence nearest the house. She brought him coffee, strong and black the way he had taken it the night before. You do not have to do this, she said. You have already earned your meal and bed. Blake accepted the coffee gratefully. I know, but I can see you need help and I have the time. Where are you heading? Nowhere special. He took a long drink of coffee. I heard there might be work in Sacramento, but there is always work somewhere for a man willing to do it. Olivia hesitated, then pulled the bank notice from her pocket. Can I ask you something? You have traveled. You have seen different places. Do you know of anywhere a woman might be able to find work? Good work, the kind that pays well. Blake read the notice she handed him, his expression growing serious. $200 in 3 days. That is steep. My husband took the loan to expand the herd before he died. I have been trying to pay it, but the drought killed so many cattle and the prices have been terrible. I sold everything I could spare and some things I could not. She wrapped her arms around herself. I do not know what else to do. What about family? My parents died of fever when I was 17. Thomas had a brother in Nevada, but they had not spoken in years. I wrote to him when Thomas died, but never heard back. Olivia felt tears threatening and blinked them away angrily. She had cried enough these past months. Blake studied the notice, then looked around at the ranch, the house, the land stretching toward the mountains. How much land do you have here? 320 acres. Why? And the house, the barn, the remaining cattle. What would you say it is all worth? I do not know. Maybe $800. The land is good when there is water, but none of that matters if the bank takes it. Blake was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working as though he was thinking through something complicated. Finally, he said, I have an idea, but you might think I am crazy for suggesting it. I am 3 days from losing everything, Mr. Johnson. I will hear any idea that is not illegal. Marry me. Olivia stared at him, certain she had misheard. What? Marry me, Blake repeated, meeting her eyes directly. I have nearly $300 saved from the past few years of work. It is not quite enough, but I could sell my horse and saddle my rifle. Between what I have and what we could raise quickly, we might be able to pay off the debt. You cannot be serious. I am completely serious. Blake set down his coffee cup. Look, I know it sounds strange, we barely know each other, but you need help and I have been drifting for too long. This place, it could be a good spot to settle down, and your boy needs a father. He had a father, Olivia said sharply. Thomas was a good man. I am sure he was. I am not trying to replace him. Blake's voice was gentle but firm. But Daniel needs someone to teach him how to work a ranch, how to be a man, and you need someone to help you keep this place running. It could be a practical arrangement, a partnership. A partnership, Olivia repeated numbly. You are talking about marriage. I am talking about survival, Blake said. Yours and your son's. Everything else we can figure out as we go. Olivia turned away from him, her mind racing. The idea was absurd. She could not marry a stranger, a drifter who had appeared out of nowhere. What did she know about him really? He could be a criminal, a liar, anything. But what choice did she have? She had exhausted every other option. In 3 days, the bank would take everything, and she and Daniel would be turned out with nothing. At least this way, they would have a roof over their heads and land beneath their feet. "Why would you do this?" she asked quietly. "What is in it for you besides a failing ranch and a ready-made family?" Blake picked up his coffee again, studying the horizon. "Honestly, I am tired of wandering. I am tired of sleeping under different stars every night and never having a place to call home. I am nearly 30 years old, and I have nothing to show for it but a horse, a saddle, and some money in my pocket. Maybe it is time I built something that lasts. And you would build it with a woman you do not love and a child that is not yours. Love can grow," Blake said simply. "My parents had an arranged marriage. My father needed a wife to help run his homestead, and my mother's family needed one less mouth to feed. They learned to love each other over time, built a good life together until the fever took them both." Olivia's hands shook as she clasped them together. This was madness, but it was also possibly her only chance. "If I agreed to this," she said slowly, "what would you expect from me?" Blake looked at her steadily. "Hard work, same as I will give, honesty, respect. As for the rest, we can take that as slow as you need. I will not force myself on you, if that is what you are worried about. We can figure out that part of things when and if you are ready." The fact that he addressed it directly, without embarrassment or impropriety, eased something in Olivia's chest. She took a deep breath. "I need to think about it." "You have until tomorrow morning," Blake said. "That will give us 2 days to get the money together and pay the bank if you say yes." Olivia spent the rest of the day in a fog, going through the motions of her chores while her mind turned over Blake's proposal from every angle. She watched him work, noticing the care he took with even the smallest repairs, the patience he showed when Daniel followed him around asking endless questions. That evening after Daniel was in bed, she sat on the porch with Blake, the summer night warm around them. Crickets sang in the grass, and somewhere an owl hooted softly. "Tell me about yourself," Olivia said. "If I am going to consider this, I should know more about the man offering his name." Blake leaned back against the porch post. "Not much to tell, really. Born in Missouri in 1850. My parents had a small farm. I was the youngest of 4 boys. When the war came, my older brothers enlisted. 2 of them never came home. The other came back missing a leg and died of infection a year later. I was too young to fight, which probably saved my life." "I am sorry," Olivia said softly. "After the war, my parents got sick, same fever that took half the county. I buried them on our land, then sold the farm because I could not bear to stay there alone with all those ghosts." He was quiet for a moment. "I have been moving ever since. Worked cattle drives, hired on at ranches, did some mining for a while in Colorado. Saved what I could, but never had a reason to settle anywhere. And now you think a failing ranch in California is that reason?" Blake looked at her, and in the moonlight his eyes were serious. "I think sometimes you have to make your own reasons, build your own life instead of waiting for it to find you." "What if it does not work?" Olivia asked. "What if we cannot stand each other after a month? Then we will figure it out. But I think we can make it work if we both try. You seem like a sensible woman, and I have been told I am reasonably tolerable when you get to know me." Despite everything, Olivia found herself smiling. Reasonably tolerable. What a ringing endorsement. "I am also told I am good with horses, decent at cards, and I make excellent coffee." "Your coffee is too strong. You will get used to it." The easy banter felt strange and comfortable at the same time. Olivia studied this man who had appeared in her life like something out of a dime novel, offering solutions to impossible problems. "If I say yes," she said carefully, "we do this properly. A real wedding, even if it is quick. Daniel needs to understand this is permanent, not just some arrangement that will fall apart. Agreed. And I want your word that you will never raise a hand to me or my son. You have it, Blake said without hesitation. I have never hit a woman or a child, and I do not intend to start. Olivia took a deep breath. Then I suppose we should ride into Bodie tomorrow and find a preacher. Blake stood up and extended his hand. Partners. Olivia shook it, feeling the calluses that spoke of hard work and honest labor. Partners. They rode into Bodie the next morning, Daniel sitting in front of Blake on his horse while Olivia rode Thomas's old gelding. The town was busy with the usual chaos of a mining settlement, miners and merchants, and painted ladies all mixing together on the dusty streets. The preacher, Reverend Walsh, was a thin man with kind eyes who listened to their story without judgment. You understand this is a permanent commitment? He asked. Not something to be entered into lightly, we understand, Blake said firmly. And you, madam, you are doing this of your own free will, Olivia nodded. I am. Reverend Walsh married them in his small church with Daniel and the Reverend's wife as witnesses. The ceremony was brief and simple. Blake had bought a thin gold band from the general store, and it slid onto Olivia's finger with surprising ease. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Blake kissed her gently on the cheek, a gesture that was respectful rather than passionate. Afterward, they went to the bank. Blake emptied his account, counting out $273. Combined with the $42 Olivia had managed to scrape together, they had enough to pay off the loan with $15 to spare. The banker, a portly man named Henderson, looked surprised to see Olivia with a husband. Mrs. Mercer, I did not realize you had remarried. Mrs. Johnson now, Olivia said, drawing strength from Blake's solid presence beside her. And we are here to settle the debt. Henderson counted the money twice, then stamped the loan papers paid in full. Well, I must say I did not expect this. Congratulations on your marriage. Outside the bank, Olivia felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for months. The ranch was safe. She and Daniel would not be thrown out on the street. She had a husband again, even if she barely knew him. Thank you, she said to Blake as they walked back to where Daniel was waiting with the horses. I know this was not how you expected to spend your savings. Money is just money, Blake said. But a home, a family, that is worth something. They spent Blake's remaining $15 on supplies for the ranch and a peppermint stick for Daniel. On the ride back, Olivia found herself studying her new husband. He had a good profile, strong and honest. His hands on the reins were steady and sure. She barely knew him, but he had saved her life today as surely as if he had pulled her from a flooded river. That night, after Daniel was asleep, Olivia showed Blake the spare room where he could sleep. I hope this is acceptable, she said, suddenly awkward. It is not much, but it has a real bed. It is more than acceptable, Blake assured her. Thank you, Olivia said, for everything. I know this must seem strange to you being married to someone you barely know. Seems strange to both of us, Blake said with a slight smile. But we will figure it out, Olivia, one day at a time. Hearing him say her name sent an unexpected warmth through her. She nodded and retreated to her own room, closing the door gently. That night she lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling and trying to process how much her life had changed in just 2 days. The next weeks fell into a rhythm. Blake threw himself into the ranch work with tireless energy, fixing everything that had fallen into disrepair during Thomas's illness and after his death. He worked from dawn until dusk, mending fences, clearing irrigation ditches, preparing for the cattle sales in the fall. Olivia worked alongside him when she could, managing the house, the garden, and caring for Daniel. Slowly, They began to learn each other's rhythms and habits. Blake woke early and started coffee before dawn. Olivia discovered he liked his eggs scrambled and his bacon crisp. Blake learned that Olivia hummed when she was content and grew quiet when she was worried. They talked during meals, sharing stories of their pasts, their hopes for the ranch. Daniel took to Blake immediately, following him everywhere and absorbing knowledge about horses, cattle, and ranch work like a sponge. Blake was patient with the boy, answering endless questions and teaching him skills Thomas had never lived long enough to pass on. "He is good with Daniel," Olivia said one evening to Blake as they sat on the porch after supper. Daniel was in bed, exhausted from a full day of helping Blake repair the corral. "He is a good boy," Blake said. "Smart and willing to learn. You have raised him well." "His father would have been proud of him." Olivia paused. "I think Thomas would have liked you." Blake glanced at her. "That means a lot. I want you to know I am grateful for what you have done for us. I know this was not what you planned when you rode up here looking for a meal." "Life rarely goes according to plan," Blake said. "But sometimes the unexpected turns out better than what we planned anyway." Their hands were resting on the porch railing, close but not touching. Olivia felt the nearness of him, the warmth radiating from his body in the cool evening air. She found herself noticing things about him. The way his hair curled slightly at his collar, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the gentleness in his hands despite their strength. It had been over a year since Thomas had touched her, even longer since they had been truly intimate. She had thought that part of her life was over, that she would never feel that stirring of attraction again. But Blake made her feel things she had tried to bury with her husband. As summer turned toward fall, those feelings grew stronger. Blake never pushed, never demanded anything beyond what their partnership required. But Olivia caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her breath catch, and she knew he saw her looking at him too. One September evening, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing the first real rain in months. Olivia and Blake worked frantically to secure the livestock and batten down the barn before the full force of the storm hit. By the time they made it back to the house, they were both soaked through. "You should get out of those wet clothes," Olivia said, teeth chattering. "I will heat water for tea." She changed quickly in her room, then built up the fire while Blake changed in his. When he emerged in dry clothes, his hair damp and curling, Olivia handed him a cup of hot tea. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and the touch seemed to spark something in the air between them. Blake's eyes met hers, and Olivia saw in them a hunger that matched what she had been feeling for weeks. "Olivia," he said quietly, "I know we agreed to take things slow. And I meant what I said about not pushing you. But I need you to know that somewhere along the way, this stopped being just a practical arrangement for me." Olivia's heart pounded. "What do you mean?" "I mean I have come to care for you. More than care for you, I think about you all the time. The way you look in the morning light, the way you laugh at Daniel's silly jokes, the way you work so hard to keep this place running." He set down his tea carefully. "I am falling in love with you, Olivia. And I needed to tell you that, even if you do not feel the same way." The words hung in the air between them. Outside, rain hammered against the windows and thunder rolled across the sky. "I feel it too," Olivia whispered. "I have been feeling it for weeks and it terrifies me." "Why does it terrify you?" "Because I barely know you. Because my husband has only been dead 8 months. Because this was supposed to be a practical arrangement and I do not know what to do with these feelings." Her voice broke. "What if I am betraying Thomas's memory?" Blake crossed to her and took her hands gently. "Listen to me. From everything you have told me, Thomas was a good man who loved you. Do you think he would want you to spend the rest of your life alone and grieving?" "No," Olivia admitted. "He would want me to be happy." Then let yourself be happy. Let yourself feel this. Blake's thumbs stroked over her knuckles. I cannot replace Thomas, and I would never try, but I can love you for who you are right now. I can be the man you need me to be if you will let me. Olivia looked up into his face, seeing the honesty there, the genuine care. She thought of all the ways he had shown up for her and Daniel over the past months, the kindness and strength he brought to their lives every day. Blake, she said softly, and then she was in his arms, and he was kissing her with a tenderness that made her want to weep. His lips were gentle but insistent, asking rather than taking. Olivia kissed him back, pouring weeks of pent-up longing into the embrace. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Blake rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me what you need," he said. "We can go as slow or as fast as you want." "I need you," Olivia said simply. "I need to feel alive again." That night they became husband and wife in truth as well as name. Blake was patient and gentle, taking his time to learn what pleased her, murmuring endearments against her skin. Olivia had thought she knew what passion was, but what she experienced with Blake was different, deeper. It was not just physical release but a connection of hearts and souls, a joining that felt right in a way that went beyond logic or reason. Afterward, lying in Blake's arms, Olivia felt more at peace than she had in over a year. "I love you," she whispered against his chest. "I love you too," Blake said, kissing the top of her head. "More than I thought it was possible to love someone." From that night on, Blake moved into Olivia's room, and their marriage became real in every sense. They settled into a new rhythm, learning each other's bodies as they had learned each other's minds and hearts. The ranch work continued, but now it felt different, like they were truly building something together rather than just surviving day to day. Daniel noticed the change in his mother and asked her one morning if she was happy. "I am," Olivia told him honestly. "Blake makes me very happy." "Is that all right with you?" "I like Blake," Daniel said. "He is teaching me how to rope, and he said when I am older he will teach me to break horses." "You mind that he is here, that he has taken your father's place?" Daniel thought about it seriously. "He has not taken Papa's place. Papa will always be my Papa, but Blake is here now and he is good to us. I think Papa would like that." The simple wisdom of her son made Olivia's eyes sting with tears. She hugged him tightly. "I think so too." That fall, the rains came properly for the first time in 2 years, breaking the drought. The grass grew thick and green, and the cattle they had managed to keep fattened up nicely. Blake made a deal with a buyer from Sacramento and got a good price for the steers they could spare. With that money, he bought more breeding stock and started planning improvements for the spring. "We could expand the herd by a third if we fixed up the north pasture," he said one evening, sketching plans on paper. "And if we dug a new well near the upper fields, we would have better water access." "That sounds expensive," Olivia said, though she loved seeing him so animated and full of plans. "It is an investment, but I think it will pay off. This is good land, Olivia. We can build something real here." "We already have," she said, covering his hand with hers. "We have built a home." Blake smiled and pulled her onto his lap. "That we have." Winter came, and with it a different kind of work. They spent the short days maintaining equipment, planning for spring, and keeping the livestock fed through the cold months. The nights were long, and Blake and Olivia spent them wrapped in each other's arms, talking about their dreams for the ranch and their life together. In January, Olivia realized she had missed her monthly courses. She waited another month to be sure, then told Blake one snowy evening as they sat by the fire. "I am going to have a baby," she said quietly, Blake's face transformed with joy. "Truly, truly. I think it will be born in late summer." Blake kissed her deeply, then dropped to his knees and pressed his ear against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. I am your papa and I already love you so much." Olivia stroked his hair, overwhelmed by emotion. She had thought she was done having children, that Daniel would be her only one. But now she was carrying Blake's baby, a new life born from the love they had found in the most unexpected circumstances. Daniel was thrilled when they told him he would be a big brother. "Can we name it after Papa if it is a boy?" he asked. Blake and Olivia exchanged glances. "I think that would be a fine idea," Blake said. "Your father was a good man, and it would be an honor to give his name to our baby." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring. Blake was attentive and protective, insisting Olivia rest more and work less. She protested that she was perfectly capable, but secretly she loved his care and concern. In June, they expanded the house, adding 2 more rooms with the help of some neighbors. The community had accepted Blake readily, seeing how hard he worked and how well he treated Olivia and Daniel. He had made friends among the other ranchers, and several times families came to visit or invited them to gatherings. At one such gathering, a barn raising for a new family in the area, one of the older women pulled Olivia aside. "That husband of yours is a good man," she said. "My Albert says he has never seen anyone work harder or more honestly." "He is a good man," Olivia agreed, watching Blake help hoist a beam into place, his shirt soaked with sweat and his muscles straining. "You look happy," the woman observed. "Happier than I have seen you in a long time." "I am," Olivia said. "I never thought I would be after Thomas died, but I am." "That is good. Life is too short to spend it grieving. Your Thomas would not have wanted that for you." As summer deepened, Olivia grew larger and more uncomfortable. Blake took over most of the heavy work, and Daniel tried to help where he could. On a hot August night, Olivia woke Blake with the news that her pains had started. Blake sent Daniel to fetch the midwife who lived 2 miles down the road, then stayed with Olivia, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with cool water. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Blake was terrified he would lose her. But as dawn broke, their son was born, healthy and squalling. The midwife cleaned him up and placed him in Olivia's arms. Blake looked down at them both, his wife exhausted but radiant, his son perfect and tiny. "Thomas Blake Johnson," Olivia said softly, "for both the men who gave him a father." Blake had to wipe tears from his eyes. "It is perfect." Daniel came in to meet his brother, his face full of wonder. "He is so small," he said, touching the baby's tiny hand gently. "Can I hold him?" They showed him how to support the baby's head, and Daniel sat very still and careful, cradling his brother. "I will teach you everything," he promised the baby. "How to ride and rope and take care of the ranch." Over the next months, life settled into a new rhythm with a baby in the house. Little Thomas was a good baby, sleeping well and eating heartily. Blake was a devoted father, walking the floor with him at night when he fussed, changing his diapers without complaint, and staring at him with wonder during quiet moments. "I never knew I could love something this much," he told Olivia one night as they watched the baby sleep. "I mean, I love you and Daniel with all my heart, but this, holding him and knowing he is part of both of us, it is overwhelming." "I know," Olivia said, leaning against his shoulder. "I felt the same way when Daniel was born. It is terrifying and wonderful all at once." As Thomas grew from an infant into a toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Blake's improvements paid off, and they were able to expand the herd significantly. They hired a young man named Pete to help with the heavy work, a quiet fellow who worked hard and asked few questions. Daniel, now 13, was becoming a real help on the ranch, able to handle many tasks independently. He had shot up several inches and showed signs of becoming as tall as Blake. He still called Blake by his first name rather than Papa, but the respect and affection between them was obvious. One evening, after a particularly good cattle sale, Blake surprised Olivia with a package from San Francisco. Inside was a beautiful blue dress, far finer than anything she had owned in years. "Blake, this is too much," she protested, though she held the dress up against herself, admiring the way the color brought out her eyes. "Nothing is too much for you," Blake said, pulling her close. "You have given me everything, Olivia. A home, a family, a purpose. The least I can do is buy you a pretty dress now and then." "You have given me just as much," Olivia said. "You saved us. You gave Daniel a father and gave me a partner and a love I thought I would never have again." "We saved each other," Blake said, and kissed her deeply. That night, after the children were asleep, they made love with the passion and tenderness of people who had learned each other's bodies and hearts over years rather than months. Afterward, lying tangled together, Olivia thought about how far they had come from that first awkward meeting on the porch. "What are you thinking about?" Blake asked, tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "About how you showed up when I needed you most. About how lucky I am." "I am the lucky one. I was drifting through life with no purpose, and then I found you and Daniel in this place. You gave me a reason to stop running. Do you ever regret it, giving up your wandering life?" Blake propped himself up on one elbow and looked down at her seriously. "Not for one single second. This life, with you and our family, it is everything I never knew I wanted. You are everything, Olivia." She pulled him down for another kiss, feeling the love flow between them like a living thing. The years passed in a blur of work and joy. Thomas grew into a sturdy, cheerful boy with his father's build and his mother's eyes. Daniel turned 16, then 18, becoming a strong young man who ran the ranch alongside Blake like a true partner. They talked about him eventually taking over the place, though Olivia could not bear to think of him leaving to start his own life. When Thomas was 5 years old, Olivia found herself pregnant again. Blake was delighted, though he worried about her more this time, as she was nearly 31 and the pregnancy seemed harder on her body. "I am fine," she insisted when he tried to make her rest. "I have done this twice before, remember?" "Humor me," Blake said. "You are carrying my child. I am allowed to worry." Their daughter was born in the spring of 1886, a tiny thing with a shock of dark hair and lungs that could wake the dead. They named her Sarah Grace, and she had Blake wrapped around her little finger from the moment she drew breath. "You are going to spoil that girl rotten," Olivia teased, watching Blake walk the floor with Sarah, singing to her in a low voice. "She is my daughter," Blake said. "I am supposed to spoil her." Daniel was 20 now, a man grown, and he had started courting the daughter of a neighboring rancher. Olivia saw the way he looked at the girl, Emma, and recognized the same feelings she had once felt for Thomas and later for Blake. "They are going to get married," she told Blake one evening. "Maybe next year." "I figured as much," Blake said. "Emma is a good girl. She will make him happy." "He is going to leave us, start his own family." Blake pulled her close. "That is what children do, love. They grow up and make their own lives, but he will not go far, and we have Thomas and Sarah to keep us busy." "And each other," Olivia added. "Always each other," Blake agreed. Daniel and Emma did marry the following spring, and Blake helped Daniel build a small house on the far end of the property. It was strange having the house quieter without Daniel's presence every day, but Olivia adjusted. And Blake was right. Daniel was not far, and he came by often to work the ranch and visit. Thomas, now 7, was following in his brother's footsteps, learning everything he could about horses and cattle. Sarah was a whirlwind at 3 years old, into everything and afraid of nothing. She rode on Blake's shoulders and demanded stories every night before bed. "We have built a good life," Olivia said to Blake one evening as they watched the sunset from their porch. the same porch where Blake had first offered his outrageous proposal nearly 9 years earlier. The best life, Blake agreed. He still wore the same worn hat he had arrived with, though Olivia had offered to buy him a new one many times. He claimed it was broken in just right. You ever wonder what would have happened if you had ridden past that day? If you had not stopped to offer to fix our fence, Blake considered it, I would probably still be drifting, working odd jobs and moving from place to place with no real home. I would have missed out on everything that matters. I would have lost the ranch, Olivia said quietly. Daniel and I would have ended up in some boarding house in town, and I would have had to take in sewing or washing. We would have survived, but barely. Instead, we found each other. Blake took her hand, running his thumb over her wedding ring, worn smooth by years of wear. Best decision I ever made, offering you my last name. Best decision I ever made, accepting it, Olivia said. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out, listening to the sounds of their children playing inside, the lowing of cattle in the distance, the rustle of wind through the grass. This was home, this was family, this was everything. Over the next years, their family continued to grow. Daniel and Emma had a daughter, making Blake and Olivia grandparents before they were 40. Thomas grew into a serious, responsible young man who loved the ranch as much as his father and brother did. Sarah remained a spirited handful, more interested in riding horses than in the domestic tasks Olivia tried to teach her. She reminds me of you, Blake told Olivia with a grin when Sarah, at 10 years old, announced she wanted to help with the cattle drive instead of staying home to help her mother with preserves. I was never that wild, Olivia protested. You stood on that porch and agreed to marry a complete stranger to save your ranch. That took wildness and courage both. Blake had filled out slightly over the years, his hair showing threads of silver at the temples, but he was still strong and vital. He could work alongside men half his age and not slow down. His face had more lines, but Olivia loved every one of them, each crease a story of their life together. Olivia had her own silver threads now, and her hands showed the work of years of managing a household and a ranch. But Blake still looked at her like she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, and she felt beautiful when his eyes were on her. On their 10th anniversary, Blake surprised her with a trip to San Francisco. They left the children with Daniel and Emma and took the train to the city, staying in a proper hotel and seeing sights Olivia had only read about in newspapers. This is too much, Olivia said, though she was thrilled by the adventure. Nothing is too much for you, Blake said, the same words he had spoken years ago. Besides, we have earned it. 10 years of hard work and building a life together. We deserve a few days to ourselves. They walked along the waterfront, ate in fancy restaurants, and attended a theater performance that made Olivia laugh until she cried. In their hotel room at night, they made love like newlyweds, the decade together having only deepened their passion and intimacy. I love you more now than I did when I married you, Blake said, holding her close. I did not think that was possible, but it is true. I love you more too, Olivia said. Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive. When they returned home, the children rushed to greet them, and Thomas and Sarah both talked over each other, telling their parents everything that had happened while they were gone. Blake scooped Sarah up despite her protests that she was too old for such things, and Thomas showed them a new foal that had been born in their absence. That night, back in their own bed, Olivia sighed with contentment. As wonderful as the trip was, I am glad to be home. Me too, Blake said. Though we should do it again sometime, maybe for our 20th anniversary. That is a long way off. It will come faster than you think, Blake said, and he was right. The years did fly by. Thomas turned 18 and began courting a girl from town. Sarah, at 15, had several young men interested in her, much to Blake's consternation. "She is too young to be thinking about boys," he grumbled to Olivia. "She is exactly the age I was when I married Thomas," Olivia pointed out, "and I turned out just fine. That was different." How was it different? Blake could not quite articulate it, but Olivia understood. Sarah was their baby, and it was hard to watch her grow up. In 1895, nearly 18 years after that fateful day when Blake had ridden up to the ranch, they gathered the whole family for a celebration. Daniel and Emma now had 3 children. Thomas had married his sweetheart, a gentle girl named Mary, and they were expecting their first child. Sarah had just turned 16 and was still firmly under her parents' roof, though she chafed at it sometimes. "Look at what we have built," Blake said to Olivia as they watched their children and grandchildren fill the house with noise and laughter. "From nothing but a desperate gamble and a borrowed name." "It was never nothing," Olivia said. "It was hope and courage and love. That is everything." Blake pulled her close and kissed her temple. "I would do it all again in a heartbeat. Every moment, every struggle, every joy, all of it, just to end up right here with you." "Me too," Olivia said, leaning into his embrace. "Thank you for stopping at my ranch all those years ago. Thank you for being crazy enough to offer to marry a desperate widow. Thank you for being brave enough to say yes." They stood together watching their family, their ranch, their life spread out before them. The journey from that desperate moment on the porch to this abundance of love and family had been long and not always easy. But every step had been worth it. Every challenge overcome had only strengthened the bond between them. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Blake and Olivia Johnson stood together on the porch where their story had begun. The land stretched out before them, green and fertile, dotted with cattle bearing their brand. The house behind them rang with the laughter of children and grandchildren. And between them flowed a love that had started as a practical arrangement and grown into something deep and true and permanent. Sarah came running out, followed by her nieces and nephews. "Mama, Papa, come inside. We are going to have cake." Blake and Olivia exchanged one more glance, a look that held 18 years of shared history. And then they allowed themselves to be pulled back into the celebration. This was their life, built from courage and desperation, and a wandering cowboy's willingness to offer his last name to a widow who could not pay her debts. And it was perfect. Years later, when they were old and silver-haired, sitting on that same porch watching yet another generation of children play in the yard, Olivia would sometimes think back to that July day in 1878. She would remember the fear and desperation she had felt, the impossible choice before her. And she would remember Blake riding up out of nowhere like an answer to a prayer she had not known how to voice. "What are you thinking about?" Blake would ask, his voice rougher with age but still warm with love. "About how you saved my life," Olivia would answer. "We saved each other," Blake would say, as he always did. "That is what partners do." And they would sit together in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, watching the sun set on another day of the life they had built together from nothing but faith and love and a willingness to take a chance on each other. The ranch would continue under Thomas's capable management, with Sarah and her husband helping. Daniel's children would grow and have children of their own. The Johnson name would become respected throughout the county, known for honesty and hard work and the kind of love that lasted. But through it all, at the center of everything, would be Blake and Olivia, the traveling cowboy and the desperate widow who had taken a chance on forever and found exactly that. Their love story would be told and retold to grandchildren and great-grandchildren. A reminder that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places, and that courage and faith can build something lasting from even the most desperate beginnings. On a spring morning in 1912, Olivia would wake to find Blake still sleeping beside her, his hand still clasped in hers as it had been for 34 years. She would watch him breathe, this man who had given her everything, and thank God for the day he had ridden into her life. When he woke, his first sight would be her face, and he would smile the way he always did, like she was the best thing he had ever seen. "Good morning, love," he would say. "Good morning," she would reply and kiss him gently. They would rise and go about their day, moving more slowly now but still together, still partners. They would sit on the porch in the evening and watch the sunset, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in the same rhythm they had found all those years ago. And when their time finally came, years and years later, they would go as they had lived the majority of their lives together, side by side, their love story complete. The ranch would pass to their children, and then to their children's children, but the legacy of Blake and Olivia Johnson would live on in every beam of the house Blake had repaired, every fence post he had set, every acre of land they had worked together. Their graves would stand side by side on the hill overlooking the ranch, the same hill where Thomas Mercer had been buried all those decades ago. And on their shared stone would be carved simple words that told their whole story: partners in life, partners in love, together forever. But that ending was still far in the future. For now, on this perfect evening in 1895, Blake and Olivia Johnson stood on their porch surrounded by the family they had created, the life they had built, and the love that had made it all possible. The widow had found a way to pay her debts after all, not with money but with courage. And the traveling cowboy had found what he had been searching for all along without knowing it: a home, a family, and a love that would last all his days. The celebration continued into the night, filled with music and laughter and joy. And through it all, Blake never let go of Olivia's hand, and Olivia never stopped smiling. They had taken the longest of long shots, married as strangers to save a failing ranch, and turned it into the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. That was the real gift Blake had given Olivia all those years ago on that dusty July day. Not just his name or his money, but his heart, his strength, his unwavering presence through every trial and triumph. And Olivia had given him the same, creating together something far greater than either of them could have built alone. As the stars came out over the California hills, and the party finally wound down, Blake and Olivia stood together one last time that evening on their porch. Sarah had finally gone to bed. The grandchildren were sleeping in various corners of the house. Daniel and Thomas had taken their families home. The ranch was quiet again. "Happy?" Blake asked, pulling Olivia close. "Perfectly happy," Olivia said, resting her head on his shoulder. "Are you?" "More than I ever dreamed possible," Blake said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. They stood there together in the starlight, the traveling cowboy who had found his home and the widow who had found her second chance at love. Two people who had started as strangers brought together by desperation and debt, and had built a love that would echo through generations. This was their legacy, not just the land or the cattle or even the children and grandchildren who would carry on their name, but the proof that love could grow in the most unlikely soil, that courage could transform desperation into hope, and that sometimes the best things in life came disguised as impossible choices. Blake Johnson had offered his last name to Olivia Mercer on a day when she had nothing left to lose, and in accepting, she had given them both everything to gain: Together, they had built not just a ranch or a family, but a testament to the power of faith, courage, and love to transform lives. And so they stood together under the stars, these two unlikely lovers, grateful for every moment that had led them to this place, this time, this perfect life they had created together. The story that had begun with a debt and a desperate offer had become something beautiful beyond measure. A true and lasting love that would endure for all their days and beyond.